I've always been a big fan of FMV games, and as gaming has evolved and budgets to hire better actors have increased, I feel they've gotten even better in recent years than the old games from the 90s, though I'm always gonna hold a soft spot for how cheesy 90s FMV games were.
I was watching you upholster and you're so big and strong.
So when I got the chance to review Not For Broadcast, I knew I had to jump on it to see what it had in store. So thank you to publisher tinyBuild for providing the review code. And as always, nobody told me to say anything I'm gonna say in this video. This is not sponsored, it's just my honest opinion going in. They're just like, hey, here's a review code, have fun, go nuts, and do your thing. And do my thing is the thing that I shall do. Not for broadcast. Let's go. Not For Broadcast is a brand new game currently in early access, developed by Not Games and published by tinyBuild. It takes place in an alternate pre-dystopian 1980s, in a world at the turning point, where a seemingly well-meaning but ultimately kinda suspicious and shady new world order known as Advance has just begun to take control of the world, making new changes in the name of fairness, as they put it. You play as a faceless protagonist who works for the National Nightly News and goes into the studio to clean it up, only to be thrust into a new position, going from janitor to editor? Producer? I don't really know what you'd call it exactly, but basically, you're the guy who decides what the people see. A lot of power and a lot of responsibility, all being thrust at you over the phone at the last possible minute by the guy who usually does this job.
You're gonna have to run the news tonight. Now don't worry, it's not hard and I'm gonna stay on the phone and help you.
You get to pick what camera to show, what commercials to air, and you're even responsible for censoring foul language.
What's your profanity?
Right, I'm sorry.
This is where the core gameplay comes in. The center screen is a live feed of what you're choosing to display. The right screen is a delayed version of that center screen, and that's what's being broadcast on TV. And the four left screens are what you can choose from to display, using the four corresponding buttons on the bottom left. You can also use the 1 through 4 keys on your keyboard for the controls, but for me personally, I had this weird brain association thing where I would associate the button. It's getting sunnier, so the light's getting brighter. Anyway, I would associate the buttons with where somebody was sitting on screen, so instead of like pressing the correct number, I would press like 3 if the person talking was the third person in a row of people, but it wouldn't always be the right camera angle. I don't know, maybe it's just me and my brain is rotting from years of video games and comic books. Choosing the right camera may sound easy enough, but there's actually a lot more to it than you'd think. You may notice at the top of the screen that there is a timer and a red, yellow, and green bar. The bar represents the size of your audience. The more it stays in the green, the better. The timer represents how much time is left in the current segment of the broadcast before the next ad break. The trick is to keep the camera focused on who is talking as much as possible, but if you stay on them for too long, your audience gets bored and the bar starts to drop. So the idea is you gotta avoid going over about 10 seconds on the speaker, changing to reactionary shots, wide shots, etc., working with what the game gives you. But you can't linger on those shots for longer than 3 seconds. It's tricky to keep a good shot on the right subject at the right time and avoid staying on them for too long, and it really does keep you on your toes. It reminds me of games like Night Trap, Double Switch, or Critical Path, only instead of direct, immediate consequences for failure, your decisions or level of performance could have an impact on things to come down the line. In one level, I played an ad that I was warned I probably shouldn't play, only for there to be a news report in a later level showcasing the negative aftermath of people buying the product that was advertised. In addition to managing cameras and censoring profanity, you'll also encounter interference as displayed on this little monitor on the right. It only kicks in at certain key moments, but oh my gosh, it is stressful. You can click and drag on the yellow slider or use your mouse's scroll wheel to navigate through the interference and ensure a smooth broadcast. Fail to avoid the interference in time and this will happen. Yeah, that's only a little annoying, but do your best because the better you perform, the better your grade, and the more money you'll earn to spend. This money can be used for silly things like cosmetics, or even upgrades to the studio, which will help make the game a little easier, which I would definitely recommend investing in because, oh boy, As the story continues and new gameplay elements are added, things can get pretty hectic. I do think it's kind of funny how the game kind of just deliberately seems like it's messing with you at points, because you gotta avoid airing things like nudity, but then the game is like, surprise, streakers, and they're just running back and forth through the shots and you have to keep changing the angles to avoid showing them. It's actually pretty clever. At times it feels like the gameplay gets a little too hectic. By the third level you're doing the usual, changing cameras, avoiding signal interference and all that, but then there's an electrical storm and your buttons become electrified at random. If you press one of the electrified buttons, the screen will shake and there's a loud explosion, which is sort of meant to throw you off, but if you end up hitting too many electrified buttons too quickly, you could end up dying, apparently. I didn't, but the guy on the phone tells you that you could die. It felt like the game was starting to become a little more frustrating than fun. It's one thing to cause a distraction with the buttons, sure, but it's entirely something else to be unable to move the dial to avoid the interference and not really noticing because you normally use the scroll wheel. To get it out of the interference, you actually have to go and click on it, which will cause the screen to shake and freak out, and by the time you can actually move the thing and see what you're doing, you're already knee-deep in interference, which causes the previously mentioned loud, annoying alarm to go off until you get out of it. It's just, listen, okay, it was really annoying. I didn't like that part at all. Ultimately, what my complaint about the game getting too chaotic boils down to is, aside from what seems like unnecessary frustration, it distracts too much from what seems to be a very interesting story. In the couple of hours I spent with the game, there was more than one occasion where I'd see the news team upset over some political decision that the government had announced, only to have no idea what was going on or why they were upset, because the game was just throwing so much at me at once that the dialogue basically became background noise and my brain was focused on managing the show. Seriously, the game is fun, but it gets kind of stressful. I found myself just sitting there with my heart racing, in a good way, in a, having a fun time with the video game kind of way, but at the same time it's just like, man, this game's giving me the palps. The heart palps. Fortunately, when you do get to hear what's going on, which is still most of the time in the grand scheme of things, the acting is spot on. Not a weak performance in the bunch as far as I could tell. And the humor in the game, it really did make me laugh out loud on more than one occasion. It's not afraid to be over the top ridiculous, though sometimes to a fault in my opinion. It's a game I'd love to take more seriously, but it can get a bit too silly at times. The game does give you a chance to go into the archive and rewatch news segments and ads that had previously aired, even letting you isolate the audio to one camera. So if there's anything you may have missed, or if you noticed that some people were talking about something interesting on the screen but you couldn't hear them, you now have the chance to go in and hear what they were talking about and maybe get a little bit more info or backstory. Also, the audio for the archive videos and the cutscene at the to be continued screen is weirdly loud. Seriously, I'll turn it down for you to hear, but it's very strangely loud and fuzzy and distorted.
Cards. No, they're the right ones apparently. It's a huge day. It's not.
It's almost kind of funny, but I feel like this definitely couldn't have been intentional. Dang, waveform probably looks like this. You may have noticed that I just mentioned a to be continued screen. That's because, as I mentioned earlier in this video, Not For Broadcast is currently in early access. Now I know I just said in my Scourgebringer review that I don't really cover early access games on this channel, but I really wanted to play this. Shut up. As of this recording, the game ends on a cliffhanger after only 3 levels, teasing things to come in future updates. You can go back and make different decisions to see how things play out, but whatever you decide, you're gonna have to be patient and wait for more content to be added. In between levels, there are short text-based dialogue prompts where you can make various decisions that may or may not impact your character later in the story. While I do quite enjoy the news sections despite my frustrations, there were a few times I wanted to see these backstory bits go on a bit longer because I was just so drawn in to see what could happen to me and my family as a result of my decisions. I do think it's interesting how underneath the funny, silly news sections that make the core of the game, there's this looming darkness going on underneath it all. The threat of this new world order. The signs of the backlash and consequences of their new laws reflecting on you and your loved ones. As you simply continue your life as a working citizen, you have to make the tough decisions. Do you obey and stay loyal to your job and government, or do you help a friend or family member in need at the risk of dire consequences? As the person behind the controls, will you show what they want you to show, or will you defy the powers that be and show the world the truth? I personally am really excited to see where this game is going to end up. If you are too, you can join the game's Discord server below if you want to keep up with updates. I'm not in the Discord server myself, but hey, it's an option, there's a link. Whether you decide to play this game now or wait for the finished version, I'd say definitely keep your eye out on Nod for Broadcast if you're a fan of FMV games and games like this and Night Trap and all those other weird games that this reminds me of. Put it on your wish list, put it on your Christmas list, put it on toast. I gotta go. I'm doing the thing where I ramble on at the end of the video because I don't know how to end videos other than just being like, bye. So, bye.